What is up, ladies, gentlemen, and NBs? Welcome to tonight's episode of Rabbit Hole. Tonight we're going to be taking a deep dive into something really big and scary. DEI! Diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we're not going to be looking at it in like the modern political sense because that, it's fucking thrown around all the time. People are like, DEI this, DEI that, we're slashing this, we're slashing that. But the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion is quite literally what won us World War II. And we're going to be taking a deep dive into that, right? And we're going to talk about, what do I mean by that? Well, women, black people, Native Americans, inclusion across the board, letting women take over the factories, Soviet women snipers, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Navajo Kotar, all this shit. We're going to be talking about all these different aspects of inclusion that helped us win the war in comparison to the Germans and the Japanese, who were really exclusionary, and they were slaughtering people who were different than them. I mean, the Germans even had this idea of Jewish science. It's part of the reason why they were so far behind in the nuclear race. But we're going to get to all of that. That's why we're doing a deep dive into the rabbit hole. But before we do, I just want to remind you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, donate $7,000 to the channel. Also, down below, you can get a link to 20% off on Ground News, which is what I use to parse through all of the propaganda and bullshit and come to my own conclusions with this new media cycle. And you can get some of the merch. We've got hoodies, we've got tank tops, we've got t-shirts, we've got mugs, we've got the whole fucking 9 yards. So you go check that out. And without further ado, ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, let's take a dive. So one of the first things that I wanted to bring up, because it's relevant in today's media cycle, because there's a new Netflix movie about it, which I haven't watched, but it's the 6888, or the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, nicknamed the 6888. Now, this is an all-black unit of the U.S. Women's Army Corps during World War II. It was the only all-black unit of the WWII to serve overseas during the war. And I wanted to bring up just a little bit from their official website here. The 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion was the first and only all-black female unit to be deployed overseas during World War II. The unit was active from 1945 to 1946 and consisted of 855 women under the command of Major Charity Adams. Their nickname was 6888, and their motto was "No mail, low morale." The unit served at home and in Europe, where they sorted and routed mail for millions of American service members and civilians. By dividing their work into shifts that ran 7 days a week, the women processed an average of 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. Okay, on the 15th of March 2016, the U.S. Army Women's Foundation inducted the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion into the Army Women's Hall of Fame. LZ Garris, a veteran from the 6888th, was on hand for the induction ceremony. Now, when this is also right now currently being turned into a movie here. It's being captured on Netflix, The 6888, directed by Tyler Perry. Shout out Tyler Perry. The film stars Kerry Washington as Major Charity Adams and Milwana Jackson as Captain Abby Noel Campbell. Now, when news of this first came out, there were all these fucking beta bitch, soft, yellow belly, fucking racist men coming out and being like, oh yeah, they were parsing through the mail. And these are the same guys who love to watch war movies where like a veteran finally a soldier gets a letter from home and he's like, hey fellas, my wife sent me a picture of the baby. She's looking good. And it's like, motherfucker, how do you think those guys got their fucking mail? It was these women, 65,000 letters per shift. There's multiple shifts in a goddamn day, dipshit. Sending out mail to fucking millions of people. This is just one example. This is just one example that we're going to be diving into how exclusion will lose you a war. Exclusion will destroy your culture. Exclusion will lower productivity. Excluding people who are gay or black or Jewish or Latino or Native or anything of the sort, and limiting your base, your army, your government, your workforce to just people of one specific culture or ethnicity. This is why the Germans lost. This is why the Germans lost, and this is why we fucking won. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next piece here. The next one we have here is one of my favorites, the Navajo Code Talkers. Now, if you don't know much about the Navajo Code Talkers, these are the veterans, survivors. These guys are fucking heroes. But these men were Marines, and they were also Native Americans. They spoke Navajo, and they used their native language in code to communicate in a way that the Japanese couldn't fucking crack, right? See, for a long time during the war and during World War I, a big thing was talking in code, right? So you would be, even if you're speaking English, instead of saying the enemy is on their way, you would say something like, Dog 7 inbound to grid 9. Some fucking stupid code to make the enemy have to translate it, right? The Japanese kept on cracking our code, so eventually we decided that we would deploy these Navajo. When the Japanese broke Allied military codes used to protect operational plans in the Pacific Theater during World War II, the United States Marines turned to the Navajo Nation for help. The Marine Corps selected 29 Navajo men to develop a code based on the complex unwritten Navajo language. Unfucking written. When the Marines hit the beaches for the pivotal battles of Guadalcanal in 1942 and Iwo Jima in 1945, Navajo code talkers were at their side. We were out there using Navajo language, transmitting messages, Thomas Begay said in November 2023, remembering his experience as a Navajo code talker at Iwo Jima amid the horrors of the battle. War is a sad thing, but what do you do if you're there? You provide communication and you don't stop communication. The code talkers sent communications by telephone and radio in their native language, substituting Navajo words for military terms that weren't part of their language. For example, the word bomb was egg, and the names of different birds stood in for different types of aircraft. They also used alternative terms for letters in the English alphabet to spell words that weren't part of the code. Code talkers could translate 3 lines of English in 20 seconds, instead of the 30 minutes it took to encode a message with existing machines, according to the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And while those machines needed to be kept secure, a code talker with a radio could go anywhere. So these code talkers, these Navajo men who we fucking demolished their people. We fucking ruined their land and pushed them onto reservations and slaughtered millions of them with war and disease. And yet, they stood by us. They stood by our side, and they understood that we have to come together against this common enemy. And that's the beauty of storytelling and of specifically telling stories like this, is that I could tell you a million times to fucking stop hating each other, but if you have a common enemy, a common goal, then you will come together, and you will see that you work better when you work together, rather than butting heads all the time and saying, yeah, well, no, white people are better at this, and black people are better at this, and Asians are better at this. If we can work together and come together as a society, as a fucking species even, reach a state of singularity, we're going to be all right. But as long as we hold on to these ideas of exclusion and segregation and superiority and nationalism and jingoism, as long as we hold on to these ideas, theocratic fascism, right, we're never going to progress. This is why the Germans couldn't progress. This is why we, the Allies, could progress, because we worked together. We settled our differences, okay? We've got a little bit more with the Navajo code talkers here. The idea to use the Navajo for secure communications came from Philip Johnson, the son of a missionary to the Navajos, and was one of the few non-Navajos who spoke their language fluently. Johnston, reared on the Navajo reservation, was a World War I veteran who knew of the military's search for a code that would withstand all attempts to decipher it. He also knew that Native American languages, notably Choctaw, had been used in World War I to encode messages. Very, very interesting, if you ask me. Let's move on. Let's talk about African Americans fighting in World War II. So, I'm not sure if you know this, guys, but over 1 million fucking African Americans fought in World War II. I know that when you watch movies or even real documentary footage of the war, you're not going to see a lot of the black soldiers. And why is that? Well, we are racist. Systemic racism plagues our past and the present. But they didn't want people to know, right? And this is the same thing that we did in World War I. The black people were the first in and the last out, and a lot of them ended up staying in France. But I want to talk about some of the, African Americans who fought for freedom at home and abroad during World War II. More than 1 million African American men and women served in every branch of the United States Armed Forces during World War II, in addition to battling the forces of fascism abroad. These Americans also battled racism in the United States and in the United States military. The Army, Navy, and Marine Corps all segregated African Americans into separate units because of the belief that they were not as capable as white service members. Adding to this indignity, the Army frequently assigned white officers from the American South to command black infantrymen. That is so fucked up. They literally were putting like guys with heavy southern twang to make these fucking black people feel like they were enslaved again. In spite of dispiriting obstacles, African Americans fought with distinction in every theater of the war. Some of the more famous black units include the 332nd Fighter Group, which shot down 112 enemy planes during the course of the 179 bomber escort missions over Europe, and the 261st Tank Battalion, which served in General George S. Patton's 3rd Army. Major General Willard S. Paul of the 26th Division singled out the 761st for special praise after its action in France by writing, "I consider the 761st Tank Battalion to have entered combat with such conspicuous courage and success as to warrant special commendation." African Americans also served equally vital positions throughout the Army as nurses, engineers, truck drivers, gunners, and paratroopers. Here's Patton giving Private Jenkins the Silver Star for his conspicuous gallantry in France. Wow, I know Patton definitely didn't like doing that. He was a racist son of a bitch. Lesser-known units include the African-American 92nd and 93rd Infantry Divisions, which fought in European and Pacific theaters, respectively. The 25th Infantry Regiment of the 93rd Division took part in Bougainville campaign in April and May of 1944. One member of the regiment, Corporal Alex Hamilton, wrote home, "The Japanese are very clever fighters. Our boys are learning them, but they have taken the lives of several of my friends. Life is cheap and death is common, but we're slowly growing used to it." Look at these guys. But there you go. There's an example of black people and white people fighting alongside against our common enemy. And even though we were still treating the black people like fucking shit, they knew what was worse. What was worse was the idea of fascism. What was worse was giving up all bonds of brotherhood and all ideas of moving forward in order to regress and move backward. That was the common enemy. The common enemy that got all of us to come together and fight alongside each other was the fucking fascists, was those who were saying that their ideology was so superior that they had the right to force you to live under it. Freedom, democracy, these are the beliefs that keep America moving. These are the beliefs that keep the Western world moving. Nations like modern Russia, that is not what we stand for. The example of just invading your neighbor and applying pressure to get what's yours, that is not what America stands for. In fact, that is what we fought against together. Let's keep on moving. The next thing we have is all of the women. Over 350,000 American women fought in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. Women have been serving as Army and Navy nurses for decades, but World War II led to new opportunities for women to enlist in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. In 1942, Congress created the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, then the WAC, which we were previously talking about. And the Marine Corps Women's Reserve. The Coast Guard established a women's unit known as SPAR, short for Semper Paratus, Always Ready. Oh, I like that. Women aviators flew with the Women's Air Force Service by the WASP unit. I like that name too. But you see, I mean, look at this, bro. Look at this woman cleaning a fucking Browning. Not to mention, guys, not to mention the fact that women, let me see this. Yeah, look at this. Women were the ones who were, like, primarily controlling the American industrial machine while all us boys and men were out in fucking war. Who do you think was making the bullets? Who do you think were making the tanks and the planes? It was your grandmother the whole fucking time. It was these women. These were the women. These were the people who were making your fucking planes. Okay? Right here. All right? So stop with the whole shit. Stop pretending like we would be better off without fucking women in the goddamn military. Now, another one that I want to bring up is Alan Turing. This is an example of somebody who was gay, who still, obviously, we didn't know at the time because it was a crime, but this is somebody who, he's the father of computer science. He's known as the father of computing. Alan Matheson Turing was an English mathematician, computer scientist, logician, cryptanalyst, philosopher, and theoretical biologist. This is the guy who created the fucking Enigma machine. Okay? He cracked the code. He cracked the code. Born in London, Turing was raised in southern England. He graduated, whatever, fuck you. Turing devised techniques for speeding the breaking of German ciphers, including improvements to the pre-war Polish bomba method and an electromechanical machine that could find settings for the Enigma machine. He played a crucial role in cracking intercepted messages that enabled the Allies to defeat the Axis powers in many engagements, including the Battle of the Atlantic. Now, something that I want to bring up is that although back then we were even more inclusive than the Germans, we still weren't inclusive enough. Granted, this is not the United States, this is England, but Alan Turing was fucking castrated by his government for the crime of being gay, despite the fact that he saved the entire fucking world. Okay? Turing's sexuality remained a secret for most of his life. He met his first love, Christopher Morcom, at school, but he sadly died at the age of 17. During wartime, Turing was engaged to a Joan Clark, a female friend and codebreaker. He shared his true sexuality with Joan before the engagement was reconsidered and called off. Where is it? Arrested, found guilty, and threatened with prison. Turing instead agreed to take a course of estrogen for a year. This was prescribed in an attempt to decrease his libido. Turing died shortly after his time from cyanide poisoning, with confusion still surrounding the circumstances of his death. His criminal conviction was only posthumously pardoned in 2014, 60 years after he died due to the restrictions. So this guy took his own life because they forced him to fucking castrate himself for the crime of being gay. Is that the type of world that you want to live in? Because that's the type of world that people like Donald Trump and the Conservative Party want to live in. But we're talking about history. Let's move on to another example of black people coming out on top. The Tuskegee Airmen were a group of primarily African-American military pilots of airmen who fought in World War II. Excuse me, I have to burp. Whoa! But you guys all know about the Tuskegee Airmen. I think they're also nicknamed the Red Tails. All black military pilots who trained in the United States trained at Greil Field, Kennedy Field, and Moton Field, Shorter Field, and the Tuskegee Airmen Airfields. They were educated at Tuskegee Institute, located near Tuskegee, Alabama. Of the 922 pilots, 5 were Haitians from the Haitian Air Force and 1 pilot from Trinidad. It also included an airman born in the Dominican Republic and 1 born in Jamaica. So this is just another example. These guys were fucking savages. They were heroes. Okay, these guys, let's look up some of their war accomplishments. The Tuskegee Airmen were credited by higher commands with the following accomplishments. 1,578 combat missions, 179 bomber escorts, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, and another 150 on the ground. This is fucking crazy. They shot down 3 Messerschmitts. These motherfuckers are jets. Our boys were flying planes. That's a jet. We shot... You're telling me the Tuskegee Airmen shot down Messerschmitt 262s? That's a jet. That's the world's first jet. Fucking crazy. But yeah, another example there for you, all right? Let's talk about the Soviet women. Over 800,000 Soviet women served in the Red Army, and these are women who actually fucking fought, not like the American women. These are women who actually fucking fought. God, that chick's kind of hot. But that's not the point. The point is that we have like the night bomber pilots, also known as the night witches. I've made plenty of videos about the night witches. We got the snipers, medical personnel. They had some tank battalions too. 7 million women died prematurely, and many more being permanently impaired. Jesus fucking Christ. Not only were the Soviet women fighting, we had Latin American troops. We combined forces with Latin American countries, primarily Brazil. Brazil sent troops to the European theater and was instrumental in providing air bases for the resupply of combatants. Also had an important part in the anti-submarine campaign in the Atlantic, right? So, again, the point that I'm trying to make, guys, is that when we came together, we had strength. And even, like, the parts of our history during World War II that were dark and grim, like, for example, Japanese internment, right? We interned fucking tens of thousands of Japanese people in the United States and put them into concentration camps and forced them to do manual labor. And at the time, we thought it was the right thing to do. And even the Supreme Court ruled fucking like 60 or 70 years later that it was completely fucking unconstitutional, right? Korematsu versus the United States, 1944 Supreme Court case. We've got it right here. Listen to this. Conviction affirmed. The Supreme Court ruled that the evacuation order violated by Korematsu was valid. Let's get to the juice here. Korematsu has been convicted of an act not commonly thought a crime. It consists merely of being present in the state whereof he is a citizen, near the place where he was born, and where all his life he has lived, right? Justice Jackson called this exclusion order the legalization of racism that violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This is an abhorrent and despicable treatment of minority groups by the dictatorial tyrannies which this nation is now pledged to destroy. He concluded that the exclusion order violated the 14th Amendment by falling into the ugly abyss of racism. And the last point that I want to make is that while we were finding ways to find common ground and fight alongside each other to defeat the Germans and the Japanese, well, the Germans were doing the complete and total opposite. They practiced something called the Deutsche Physik, right? Or Aryan physics, right? It was a nationalist movement in the German physics community in the 1930s, which had the support of many eminent physicists in Germany. The term appears in the title of a 4-volume physics textbook by Nobel laureate Philipp Lenard in the 1930s, but Deutsche Physik was opposed to the work of Albert Einstein and other modern theoretically based physics, which was despairingly labeled Jewish physics, right? What you see is that after World War I and during World War II, the Germans were so anti-Semitic, so blinded by their hatred, that they weren't even listening to the science that was provided by Jewish scientists. This is part of the reason why Albert Einstein fled Germany and came to the United States, and he was like, hey, Germany's going to be a fucking problem soon. And then he helped us create the fucking atom bomb. So while Germany is struggling with like heavy water facilities in Norway to create an atom bomb, we have scientists, and we don't give a shit whether you're Jewish or atheist or Christian or Hindu. We don't give a fuck as long as they're going to help us win the nuclear race. And we did, right? And it also ties back to the, even after the war, this is a little fucked up, but Operation Paperclip, we took so many Nazi scientists. We didn't even give a shit about that. We were so welcome with DEI. We were like, oh, dude, I mean, our Nazis are better than the Soviet Nazis, because that's essentially what the fucking space race, the arms race, the Cold War was. It was who's got better Nazis, and we had better Nazis. We took the fucking Nazi scientists. But again, that's not the point. The point of this video was to try and show you that in World War II, diversity, equity, and inclusion quite literally won the war. The combination of all different cultures and forces coming together to fight against this this exclusionary, fascist, Nazi regime. That's how we won. Not by fucking turning our back on each other. Okay? So, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Rabbit Hole. Again, I'm your host, Chris Valenti. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, donate $7,000 to the channel, buy some merch, and use the Ground News subscription. Also, I'm usually live when I'm filming these. I'm live right now. Hi, chat. But if you want to make sure that you're here for the next time that we're live, just, tune in. Thanks again. Have a good one.